How to improve the deposit rate. A project of Team 5.4. The environmental crisis is no longer a distant threat. It's here, and it's devastating. Every year, 41 billion plastic bottles, glass bottles, and cans are consumed across the EU, and far too many end up littering our streets, parks, and waterways. In the Netherlands alone, plastic waste contributes to 1.4 million tons of waste annually. These discarded bottles and cans don't just disappear, they pollute our ecosystems, suffocate wildlife, and choke our oceans. Shockingly, over 80% of marine plastic comes from land, with bottles and cans being key culprits. A single plastic bottle takes up to 450 years to decompose, breaking down into microplastics that seep into our water, our food, and even our bodies. It's not just a litter problem, it's a health crisis. But that's not all. Every time we fail to recycle plastic, we pump more and more CO2 into our atmosphere. For every kilogram of unrecycled plastic, 6 kilograms of CO2 are emitted. Imagine this, the unrecycled plastic bottles in the Netherlands each year contribute as much CO2 as the entire global aviation industry does in a year, every flight, every cargo trip, every single plane in the sky. This is the kind of waste we simply cannot afford. One of the most effective ways to combat the damage caused by plastic waste is by recycling. However, despite the availability of deposit drop-off points, many people still choose not to return their plastic bottles. But what drives this behavior? The first key factor is the social proof bias. People are heavily influenced by what they perceive others are doing. When they see others not returning their bottles, they may believe that their individual effort won't significantly impact climate change. Another factor is loss aversion, where the time and effort required for recycling feels like a personal loss, which discourages action. We came up with a few interventions to tackle the social proof bias and the loss aversion consumers experience. Research tells us that consumers who have more knowledge on recycling and environmental pollution are more likely to recycle and to return their deposit products. The first adjustment we thought of is adding a sentence on climate change on the deposit bottle or can. By seeing how much of an impact a bottle can make, consumers learn about their contribution to climate change and are more willing to make an effort and return their deposit products. In combination with these sentences, we want to launch an educational campaign on recycling and deposit products on the radio and television. This campaign will have the slogan, "Everyone is doing it. Why aren't you?" Together, these interventions can tackle the social proof bias. Next to this, we thought of a second adjustment on the design of deposit products. Right now, people often do not distinguish the deposit price from the actual price for the drink. When a consumer treats the paid sum and the refund as two separate interactions, they are less likely to return the deposit product. The second adjustment, therefore, is adding the actual deposit price to the design. When people can see how much the bottle or can is worth, they are more likely to separate the cost of the deposit and the cost of the drink itself. When this is separated, the consumer will experience a higher loss aversion, leading to more incentive to recycle the bottle or can, and it could also help consumers who cannot read in Dutch very well. This will change their loss aversion. Now, they will perceive the deposit price as lost when they do not hand in their deposit product. To test if these interventions work in regards to breaking the biases connected to the problem and improving return rates, we need to conduct an experiment. In this experiment, we will test the interventions separately so that we can see which one is the most effective, but also together to see if this even further increases the return rate. The experiments will take place in different supermarkets in different regions, but with the same key characteristics, so that the experiment will not be influenced by differences other than the interventions. Once the intervention has been implemented at the store, we will track the change in the return rates by looking at the data provided by the recycling machines to see if the intervention has the desired effect. To know whether an intervention is successful or not, we will look at certain key performance indicators, such as the actual return rate, the time it takes for an intervention to have an effect on the return rate, and the amount of people who actually notice the change. The last one will be measured by a survey that will be conducted with the customers off the relevant stores. The text highlights the urgent environmental crisis caused by plastic waste, particularly bottles and cans, which pollute ecosystems, harm wildlife, and contribute to CO2 emissions. Despite recycling opportunities, behavioral biases like social proof and loss aversion hinder people from returning deposit bottles. Interventions such as adding climate change messages on bottles and running educational campaigns aim to counter these biases and encourage recycling. Additionally, redesigning deposit products to make the deposit cost more visible can increase loss aversion, prompting higher return rates. These strategies will be tested in supermarkets to assess their effectiveness through return rate data and customer feedback.